purple line, which would be this one here, which is in fact the fastest growing, is in fact the creative class. This shows the creative class from about 1900 through, estimated through 2025 or so, 2020. And it is the fastest growing share of the workforce, has grown significantly since the turn of the previous century. The green line at the bottom, right, is farming, fishing, and related. Right, as a share of the workforce has gotten much, much smaller, still produces enough food to feed everybody, though, right? The red line at the top is services, the service class. So it's people doing low-wage service work. It's not just the entire service industry. You look at service industry, which includes, banking and finance and insurance and all these other things. There's a lot of creative workers in there. When we talk about what people do, though, it's not, again, where you work, but what you do. When we talk about what people are doing, you see there's a lot of low-wage service jobs out there. Personal service and other service, clerical and other jobs. And then the blue line is manufacturing and construction, right, the working class. So those are the shares, how the actual shares have changed over the past 100 years or so in the U.S. These are the total numbers, how big they have grown, again, over the same time frame. These are the shares for Canada, again, over basically the same time period, similar to the pattern for the U.S. The number pattern follows a similar pattern as well. You see that, in fact, as a group, the creative class is the fastest growing, and has grown significantly, again, over the past 100 years. The other thing that's interesting is to understand where these people are working. Right, so top line is services as an industry. So this is the industry. This is not just workers in the service industry. The bottom line is the goods producing sector, so manufacturing. How much total employment has there been this is for Canada, in those areas, right? You see the goods producing sector has been shrinking. The share of employment has been shrinking, while the services has been gaining, similar to what we've seen on the similar patterns as the others. But if you look at total employment, you actually see that the goods producing sector, manufacturing, has actually stayed fairly level in terms of total employment over the past, and this goes back about 25, 30 years. The services has been growing tremendously, right? So most of the growth is in services in terms of employment, but if you actually look at output, you see a different story. And the interesting thing about the output one, this actually marches right along with this idea of creativity being about what you do and not where you work. So much of the creativity that's been applied and the impact that we've had on the economy from creativity and creative workers is actually happening in the manufacturing sector. Right? So it is programmers and designers and creative, intelligent people doing innovative work in manufacturing that has led to this incredible growth in output for manufacturing, for goods producing, without having to increase employment. Right? Employment was level. Employment has hardly changed at all over the past 30 years. But yet output continues to increase. Services is also increasing at a slightly faster pace, but services employment is also growing a lot faster. Right? So we're hiring more people for services, producing more from it, but we're having to hire more people to do it. So we've actually seen in manufacturing, right, there's been this tremendous increase in productivity that has come about from people being creative and applying creativity to the manufacturing process. Right? So it's not just about, again, it's not just about artists and musicians, it's not just about doctors and bioscientists, right? It's about engineers and production planners and good managers and people doing things in businesses and manufacturing as well. So there's an opportunity there that you can see if you look at what's been going on kind of across the economy. So that's one piece, right? We look at the growth and what's been happening. The other thing that's really interesting about the creative class and creative occupations is the stability. This is for Canada, it shows the past about 20 years or so of unemployment rates. The top line is for people working in services and manufacturing and construction. The bottom line is people that have creative jobs. And what you see is that the creative employment is much more stable. We get the little bump in the 90s, right, that hit everybody, but creative unemployment only jumped to about 4%. It is right now. This went through the end of 2008. We've looked at the new numbers, and right now it's back up to about 4% for the creative class, that's it. So you always see it jumping somewhere around between 2 and 4% for unemployment in the creative class. Whereas, and in fact, if I separate out here these routine jobs, which include both service workers and manufacturing and construction workers, if I separate out the manufacturing and construction jobs, you see that they have even harder, they're even harder hit in terms of unemployment. So the real shocks that happen to the system in terms of when there's unemployment, when things are happening, are actually happening in the manufacturing and construction. Are the places where you really have to hit. The creative jobs have get a little bit of fluctuation in them. This is percentages, so it's allowing for the difference in size. But you're seeing a little bit of fluctuation, but not that much. It's very steady, kind of continuous employment. The other element, so where are these? If we look across kind of where the creative class, I mean the creative class is for Ontario. This just compares Ontario to kind of Eastern Ontario. And what you see, both overall and then by type of region, right? So am I a metropolitan area, just a census area, which would be small towns, or is it a rural area? We see that Eastern Ontario outperforms the rest of the province in terms of creative class. We also see that there are more creative workers the more urban an area is. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. The other thing that's important is, and I keep this slide in even though I present in Canada because 30, 40, 50 rule is so easy to remember. And it doesn't work out. The 34.342 rule doesn't make near as much sense. But the idea is, right, the creative class is 30% of the US workforce. In Canada, as I said, it's about 30%. Depending on what you look, it's 28 to 32% or so. But it's right around 30%. In the US, it's about 40 million people. In Canada, right, the 1/10 rule applies. It's 4.3 million people are in the creative class in Canada. They do make 50% of the wages. In the US, half the wages earned are earned by creative class members. So in addition to having stability in terms of unemployment, they also have, on average, have higher wages. Now this is one of the things that's really important as well, because when you talk about the creative class though, it is, again, I said class is not hierarchical in any way. It also doesn't mean that they're all high wage individuals. In fact, some of the lowest paid people in society are in the creative class. Okay? They are educators or artists. So you don't have, right, it's not that this all high wage people are automatically in the creative class. When we talk about creativity and innovation and how those things are driving what's going on and driving the economy, it's important to understand, yes, there are high wage people there. Bill Gates is part of the creative class. It just works out that way. He's a manager. Now he's retired, actually. I guess he's not anymore. He's now retired. But Warren Buffett's not retired. He's still in the creative class. He's a business owner. Right? But you still, so you do get a lot of very rich people. You got a lot of people, engineers and doctors and lawyers, and people who do make a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not only about people making lots of money. There are, in fact, one of the things that we've really learned as we look at this is the idea of creativity being so important actually really does, as Jane Jacobs pointed out so long ago, really requires having the artists and the musicians and the other people around to help drive creativity for everybody. So the manufacturing advances that allow us to continue to see manufacturing output increase while employment stays level, some of that comes from the fact that there are engineers who are interacting with artists. I know this for a fact because I've done the work in Montreal and talked to the people from Bombardier. So I know it happens. So, but you see this, right? So it's not just about high wages, right? So because we always get, oh, it's all about this, the high wage people, it's this high class thing, and it's like, it's not. We've got some very low paid individuals in there, some of them by choice, some otherwise. But they do, so they make a lot of money. And they do, right, they also say they control a large portion of the discretionary income, which if you're a marketing firm, you like a lot. So the 30, 40, 50, I said, and then 70. I said for Canada, this actually breaks the numbers down for Canada, at least in terms of how big the workforce itself is. For Canada.